be in Proverbs chapter 4. Proverbs chapter 4. Earlier in our service, we sang an old hymn entitled, "It Is Well With My Soul." The hymn was written by Horatio Spafford. He lived in the mid to late 1870s in Chicago. He invested heavily in real estate and at that time made a lot of money in his investments. Horatio was married to a lady named Anna, and they had 5 children together, 1 boy, 4 girls. Horatio was a man of deep conviction, a man of great faith. Because of his wealth, they lived a pretty good life. But in that life, there was also a lot of tragedy. You see, in 1870, Horatio and Anna lost their only son to scarlet fever. Just 1 year later, in 1871, the Great Chicago Fire came through the city and burned up nearly all of his real estate, therefore erasing the majority of his wealth. A couple years after that, in 1873, Horatio put his wife and 4 daughters onto a ship heading to England. The plan was he was going to conduct some business, and then later when his business was finished, he was going to take a ship and he was going to join them in England. On November 22nd, 1873, that ship and another one collided on the ocean. 226 people lost their lives that day, including Horatio's 4 daughters. When his wife Anna got to England, she sent back a telegram, and it began with these 2 words: "Saved alone." As soon as it was possible, Horatio got aboard a ship. It was the only way for him to get there. And he headed for England. And he'd asked the captain of the ship he was on if he could please point out to him the place where the ships had collided, where his 4 daughters had perished. The captain actually did more than that. The captain, when he got to that place, stopped the ship just to give Horatio a moment there. And it was at that point, right there on that spot, that Horatio wrote these words: "When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well, it is well with my soul." We know the story. Kind of gives a new meaning to the song, doesn't it? But I got a question. How can our soul be well when we live in such messed up lives? This morning, that's what I want us to talk about. As we can continue our study in the book of Proverbs, looking at the wisdom of Proverbs, I want us to look at how do we know that it is well with our soul. And to do that, we have to first ask ourselves a question, because we need to get a good understanding: what is the soul? So as we begin, we have to start there. What is the soul? And here's why I think we have to start there. Because of just the mention of the word soul, there are so many different images that come to people's mind. There are so many different things that when we think soul, we think of. Some of you, at the mention of soul, may have thought of this guy. James Brown. Ow! I feel good. The Godfather. James is known as the Godfather of soul. So that might have been, or maybe that wasn't James Brown, it was this lady. Aretha Franklin. Why? The Queen of Soul. And I remember your mind didn't even go there. Maybe you went to this guy, Pat Mahomes. Now, you may not know his name, but I got a feeling you will. He's the quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs. He started the season with the lowest quarterback rating in the NFL for starters. After 4 weeks, he's number 3. And you know what folks are saying? He is the soul of the Kansas City Chiefs. Or maybe your first thought of soul was this place. Because did you know that there was a lady who advertised on eBay that she was willing to sell her soul for $2,000? Nobody took her up on it. Nobody. It went unsold. But she was willing. For $2,000, she would sell her soul. Or maybe when I said soul, you thought of this. Because you see the manufacturer, Kia, come up with a model called the Kia Soul. That's right. Yeah, so we think there's so many different things. Matter of fact, if you're flying in an airplane, here's what they list. They say, on board there are 250 souls on board this airplane. Or maybe you already knew that the International Distress Symbol, SOS, stands for Save Our Souls. So when we ask the question, what is the soul? There's so many different things that can come to mind. But we need to be on the same page. Because that term takes in so many things, I don't want us to be confused. A man came up with a graph, and I found this in one of my studies, and I think it kind of describes best what we're talking about today when we talk about our soul. The soul is the thing that encompasses all of the heart, the mind, the body, and the behavior. The soul is that thing, that core that holds it all together. The soul is that part of the being that defines our whole being. Now, that's not normally the term we use for that today. Because if we're using a term that describes all of our being, something from the innermost depths to what you see on the outside, we don't usually say it's the soul. We say the heart. I can prove it to you. You would tell someone, I love you with all my heart. Now, are we saying, when we say that we love someone with this blood-pumping vessel? No, what we're saying is we love someone with all of our being, with the thing that encompasses the core of everything that we are. So as we look at that, we're saying, I love you with all of me. Not just an organ, or not just a vessel. Or love you with all my being. I tell you this so that you can understand, when we talk about it is well with our soul, the passage, or the verse that I picked for today. And that comes from Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23. Let's go ahead and read that. Proverbs 4:23 says, keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. Keep your heart. Not talking about this blood-pumping vessel. Talking about that core, that center, that thing that encompasses all of our being. So when we say keep our heart, that means we want it to be well with our soul. So for it to be well with our soul, so that we can sing those words with affirmation that it is well with my soul, we have to look at what it means to keep our heart. So we ask the question, how do we keep our heart? Well, what does it mean for us to keep our heart? I started writing down things that I thought that it meant to keep our heart. And I want you to know I come up with 11 different things. But the good news for you is I narrowed it down to 3 that I want us to look at today. How do we keep our heart? It starts with watching. We have to watch. Well, we have to watch out. Our verse says, keep your heart with all diligence. This means we're to guard it. And we're not to guard it just like, oh, okay, whatever happens. We're to guard it like Micah was going Annie earlier. He was everywhere. Because he wanted the ball. Well, we're to keep it with that diligence. We're to watch over the issues of our heart. And here's why. Because there's all kinds of awful stuff that gets caught up in our heart. There's so many things today. Why do we have to watch? Because there's so many awful things that seems to get entangled, wrapped up inside of us. For some of you, maybe it was hurtful words. Somebody at some point in time said something that hurt you. And that something maybe it was your spouse, maybe it was a family member, maybe it was somebody at work. But that something kind of got stuck there. Maybe it was a year ago. Maybe it was 5 years ago. Maybe it was 10. Maybe it was 20 years ago. But that something has been stuck there. We have to watch. We have to watch so that those things, that stuff, don't get stuck in our heart. We have to keep our heart. For some of you, maybe it was a risk. So at some point in time in your life, you put yourself out there for something. You gave it your all. Maybe it was your time. Maybe it was your finances. Maybe it was your talents. But you gave it everything you had. It didn't quite turn out the way you wanted. Certainly wasn't the way you hoped. Maybe you could say you failed, or maybe somebody laughed at you. But you've taken that hurt and you've buried it somewhere in there deep. We have to watch so that we don't do that. For some, unfortunately for some, it may have been a pornographic image. Maybe you stumbled onto it, or maybe you searched for it. But now, somewhere buried deep is that image that continues to destroy and pollute your heart. Here's what I'm saying. There's so many harmful things that can destroy our lives. We have to keep watch. Because if not, they're coming in. Now, watching isn't just recognizing they're there. Well, that can hurt me. It's dealing with it. It's doing something about it. We have to deal with our sin. So how do we know? How can we say with honesty, it is well with our soul? Because we have kept watch over our heart and dealt with the stuff that tries to pollute it. So let me give you something else. It's not just enough to keep watch. We also have to investigate. I think you and I have to investigate our hearts. Because I think sometimes we can stray without even realizing it. Here's what the Apostle Paul said to the Galatian believers in chapter 5. He said, you were running well. What happened to you? So here's what he's saying to these folks, these Christians in Galatia. He said, you were living for Jesus. You were living a life of faith. You were surrendered to Christ. But something happened. All of a sudden, we're not seeing that anymore. That love that you once had doesn't seem to be showing. Something has taken place. We have to investigate. We have to see if there's areas of our lives that things are creeping in. Because we want to make sure that there's not stuff there to hinder us. In James chapter 1, verse 8, James talks about the unstable, or some translations say the double-minded man. James means by that. When he talks about that double-minded man, he's talking about a person that's living two separate lives. Now, we're not talking about something with a problem of schizophrenia. We're just talking about a person that knowingly is living two separate lives because on the external, what people see is they're living this. But on the internal, they're living something entirely different. On the outside, they're one thing, but on the inside, there's something else. And if we're going to investigate, we have to ask ourselves, am I a double-minded person? Am I living two different lives at the same time? Am I doing something what others see, but deep down inside, I got something else going on? So how do we know? How do we investigate to identify that? I've come up with a couple things. Maybe these are ways just for us to check, to see, are we living that level standard in life? Number one, a double-minded man finds his identity in the externals. This is a person who they find their identity in what other people see. And let me tell you how you can know that. Do you worry about what other people think or see about you? And is that the thing that constantly takes care of your being? Well, folks will see this, or I don't want folks to think this. Now, let me stop for a moment. Because I believe there are areas of our life that we are to be cautious. There are things in our life that we need to watch out for. As a Christian, we have to be concerned, are we being an example of Jesus Christ? So I do think there are things we have to watch. But I'm talking about somebody that their life, not just their Christian witness, but their life is wrapped up in what other people see, what other people think. Well, let me give you this example. Because I'm going to guess some of you have been here on Facebook. And you've placed a post. Maybe it was a picture, maybe it was a saying, maybe it was something. And you put it there. And every 15 minutes, you go back to see how many folks have liked it. Because you have that option. You can put the heart, or you can put the smiley face, or all these things. And folks can address it, and you go, oh, I've got 600 likes so far on my picture. Are we? Folks, we can't live our life for the likes. And I'm not talking about Facebook anymore. We can't live our life consumed by what others like about us. Because that person who lives their life for the likes, it's easy for them to get knocked off center. It's easy for them to be pulled away from that thing that should be the center of the relationship. And that's God. The thing that should be the center of our life. If we're more concerned about what other people think or say about us, then we're going to get sidetracked from what we think or live about Jesus Christ. So how do we know? We need to see, is our identity found in the externals? Or I think there's another way. Because I think a double-minded man lacks patience. Now, hear me out. I'm not just talking about what we may think of as patience. Because let's face it, there's probably somebody sitting here this morning that's going, I wish he'd hurry up and get this show over with. I got places to go and things to do, and I need to be out of here. The roast is in the oven, and we don't like overcooked roast. I'm not quite talking about that kind of patience. I'm talking about that person that they're so overcome with the things of life, that stuff that's coming from the outside or the inside, that it's maybe hurrying them up too much. Making them ready to go. Gotta be. Or maybe this. Here's mine. Here's how I know that I'm letting stuff creep in. And I might be the only person in the room that's ever done this, or maybe you do too. Have you ever had a conversation with a stranger in your head? Now, I'm talking about not something, you didn't say anything out loud. But you've had this conversation with a stranger. Maybe you were telling them off. You were giving them what for. And you would never, ever, ever say this out loud for people to hear. But in your mind, now, you all have noticed, because you noticed this long before I did. But when we started videoing our service, and I got to watch them, there was one thing I figured out real quick. I got to figure out how to change. And you know I've not figured it out yet. I talk with my hands. And I tell you what, when you watch it on Facebook or on YouTube, man, I look like I'm swatting flies up here. Well, here's the problem. When I'm having that conversation with a stranger in my head, and I'm telling them off about something, I talk with my hands. So I'm going, no words is coming out, my kids is going, Dad, who you telling off now? They figured me out. Because here I am, I'm making faces, and my hands is just going 90 miles an hour, because in my head, you know what that means? That means I've crossed the line. I'm living one thing on the inside, but I'm living something else on the outside. I lack patience. So, folks, we have this desire to be well with our soul. We've got to investigate our heart. We've got to keep watch over our heart. I'll give you one more thing. For it to be well with our soul, in keeping our heart, there has to be commitment. I think for our lives, there has to be commitment. Now, I know, I can almost tell what you're thinking. You're thinking, I knew that. If I had said, folks, we have to have a heart committed to Jesus Christ, you'd all said, yeah, that's right. Gotcha, Pastor. We understand that. I know. But you know what we're guilty of doing when we talk about a heart committed to Christ? We're like the person that's smiling and nodding their head and not going to do anything about it. We know it. We would all be in agreement that we have to have a heart committed to Christ. But unfortunately, we don't want to change where we're at right now. So here's what I want to do. I want to try to, rather than just tell you have a heart committed to Christ, I want to give you an illustration and of how to have a life, or how to live our life, committed to God, without living two different lives at the same time. And you know where the answer lies? Right here. This is where it lies. Now, not where you think. Because the answer actually lies in our balance. And how we balance. And the way we balance. Because if we're going to be committed to God, we've got to keep our life in balance. And I found a couple things that teach us about balance and how to do that. You might want to try it. When we're balanced, rule number one, we've got to keep our eyes on the focal spot. We've got to keep our eyes on the thing that keeps us in balance. Because you see right now, I'm looking right at the top of that bat. And I'm keeping my eyes, because I know what happens when I go looking around. I go to watching you guys and not the bat. I can't keep it in balance. So for us to keep our heart in balance, we have to keep our eyes on the focal spot. And you know what that focal spot is? Jesus. That's it. For us to know it is well with our soul, we got to keep our eyes on Christ. Keeping our eyes focused on Him. Because if we take our eyes off, It's disaster. My wife caught me practicing one day. And you know what she said? Don't bang yourself in the head. We have to keep our eyes focused. But you know there's another rule of balance. And we can keep our eyes focused all we want. But we also have to constantly keep correcting. We have to keep moving. Because if we don't correct, I can keep my eyes on that. But if I'm not correcting, we're going to fall real quick. But if I keep correcting, and I keep my eyes focused, then I can keep things in balance. Now, folks, we're not talking about baseball bats, softball bats. We're talking about our hearts. How do we keep our hearts committed to Jesus Christ? It's very simple. We keep our eyes focused on Him. That means we have to make Him first. And we have to keep our eyes focused, because if we're focused on Jesus, we're not looking all around at everything else. For us to be committed, to have a heart committed to Jesus, we have to keep our eyes on Him. But the second thing, we have to constantly be correcting. If we just say, okay, I'm going to just keep my eyes on Jesus, but I'm not going to do anything, it's not going to last long. We're going to fail. We have to constantly be correcting. Here's why. We have to deal with our sin. We have to deal with those things in our life that shouldn't be there. We have to keep the proper reference point. We have to focus on Christ. But we have to constantly correct. Those things He points out in our life that shouldn't be there, we have to correct that. And you know the best way to correct that? To correct those things isn't to say, I'm going to do. It's just to do what He tells us to do. Because often we try to correct things ourselves. We try to correct. And you know what happens when we do it on our own? We usually mess up. But the correction that Christ gives us, through His Word, through the preaching and teaching of His Word, through our studying of His Word, through the speaking of His Spirit to our hearts, the correction He gives us, that's what He wants us to do. Because that's the thing to keep our heart in balance. So maybe this morning He's been correcting you. There's a way in your life He wants you to go, and you're not going there. Or there's something in your life that you're doing that you're not supposed to be. It's time to correct. Maybe this morning you're here and you've been focusing on all kinds of stuff. But your focus has not been on Jesus. You just got so much going on today. So many things happening in life. You took your eyes off of what you're rebalancing. There's good news for you. That's called forgiveness as well. We confess that sin and He forgives us. Or maybe for you, you're just now finding that balance. Finding that prize because you have tried to balance your life. You have tried to keep your heart guarded. But you've tried it on your own. And you realize you need Jesus. Maybe today your commitment is going to be to surrender your everything. Turn it from trusting yourself to trusting Jesus and turn it over to Him. Or maybe you as a Christian is to make that commitment to keep your eyes focused on Jesus. Because right now, there's been some things pulling your eyes away. Maybe for you, it's that change. Maybe for you, it's that correcting. So that you can be where God wants you to be. Folks, I want to ask you a question. Right here, right now, where you're at, Or is there something you need to change? We're going to sing a hymn, and as we sing that final hymn, I want that to be your opportunity to make that change for Jesus. Maybe right where you're standing, you will pray. Or maybe you will come and kneel at this altar to pray. Maybe today, for the first time, you've given your life to Jesus as Lord and Savior. Or maybe it's time you let the world know that you've done that. I'm going to ask you to come as we sing. Just say, hey, Pastor, I've given my life to Jesus. Let me pray with you. Or maybe you have questions about that. How to take that trust from yourself and transfer it to Him. Let me show you in God's Word how to do that. But I want to ask you, is it well with your soul? Father, I thank you for your Word. Lord, I thank you for every person here. And Lord, as we allow you to examine our lives, I pray for each person here. That, Lord, whatever you want to do in their life, that they will say yes. Maybe it's correction. Maybe it's obedience. Maybe it's surrender. Maybe it's salvation. I pray, Lord, today we say yes, so that we can leave this place knowing it is well. It is well with our souls. In Jesus' name we pray.